Hi everyone, here again at the Australian Armour and Artillery Museum during AusArmourFest 2024, and we're taking a look today at an example of a tank from late in World War II. This is the US Army's M26 Pershing medium tank. Now this was designed to be an update and a replacement for the M4 Sherman Medium Tank that had been the stalwart of the American Armed Forces for most of World War II. It was to continue the lineage of tanks that had been made by the US, starting back with the M3 Medium, that entered production in 1941. And when the M3 and the M4 were introduced around the middle of the war, they were state-of-the-art in terms of the armour thickness that they had and the main armament that they sported. And they could take on most of the enemy tanks that they encountered on the battlefield with their 75mm main guns. Now in US doctrine, medium tanks such as the Sherman were not supposed to slug it out with all armoured threats, but they were intended to be manoeuvre elements that would take advantage of breakthroughs by moving rapidly into enemies' rear areas and exploiting breaches. They were designed to operate in concert with infantry, with artillery, anti-tank units and air force elements, and as such they were not expected to defeat all armoured threats that they would encounter by themselves. Now, however, as the war progressed, it became clear that heavier enemy tanks were being developed, and not just breakthrough tanks like the Tiger I that appeared in August 1942, but new medium tanks that would have high-velocity 75mm guns and 80mm of highly sloped armour that would give them an effective frontal protection of about 140mm. So while heavy tanks like the Tiger I and Tiger II weren't supposed to be defeated when directly engaged by US medium tanks, tanks like the Panther, the Panzer V, they sort of were. And it was for this reason that development progressed on new US medium tank concepts that could correct the shortcomings of the M3 and the M4 and to better cope with the increasingly capable German tanks that were planned. So what were some of the shortcomings of the existing US medium tanks? Well, the M3 Lee and the M4 Sherman had been designed to use the Continental R975 aero engine that was designed by Wright Aeronautical. This was quite a tall engine, and consequently both the Sherman and the Lee had rather high hulls. This engine choice had been made in the late 1930s and early 1940s because the US automobile industry didn't really have any engines that were powerful enough for a tank, so they had to borrow an aero engine. The M3 and the M4 were also designed to use bogie-type suspensions, which, while very modular and easy to maintain, didn't provide very good off-road performance, at least compared to some of the better suspension types that were out there. Both of these vehicles were also designed to operate on a battlefield where enemy gun tanks were typically sporting a 37mm main gun and had around 50mm of frontal armour. And so the armament that the M3 and the M4 were equipped with was sufficient for that battlefield, which was rapidly changing. The things that the M3 and the M4 did well, that the US had to maintain, was that they weren't extremely heavy, at least compared to some of the tanks the Germans were producing. And that was because they had to be compatible with ships, with railway cars and with standard bridge load limits. By 1944, the US Army had become the world expert at managing the logistics of building its equipment on one continent, the US, making its ammunition there, training its personnel there, even making their food there, and shipping it to employment at the tip of the spear all over the world, whether it was Africa, Europe, the Pacific Rim, or in Asia. And that capability had to be maintained with any future equipment that they designed. So with this in mind, the US embarked in May 1942 on projects to look at power plants, drivetrains, main armaments, suspensions, and even autoloaders that could be used in future medium tanks. A failed heavy tank project, the M6 Heavy, also gave this work new impetus when it became clear that there was no future tank that was coming that was going to be able to replace the Sherman, and that the M4 had reached its development limit with the 76mm main gun. So the resulting design for a new medium tank include a cast hull and turret, like you can see here on the M26, a 6-wheel torsion bar suspension, a low-profile Ford 18-litre V8 engine to keep the hull lower than in the Sherman, and a rear transmission and drive layout, as well as the 90mm M3 anti-tank gun that had been developed from an anti-aircraft gun and was made by the US Ordnance Department at Waterfleet Arsenal. This was the same gun that was mounted on the M36 Jackson tank destroyer that I've made a video about very recently. Now, despite a lot of disputes within the US Army about the need for this heavier tank, General George Marshall himself in December 1943 overruled all the naysayers and authorised the production of 250 T-26E1 heavy tanks. Full production did not commence until November 1944, under the designation T26E3, with the tank finally being standardized as the M26 in March 1945. And that's the tank that you see before you. Now this version here is slightly updated from that production version. This is an M26A1, and that all comes down to the gun which has been mounted, which is an updated version of the 90mm M3. Now here we are at the rear of the tank. Looking underneath, you can see the 6 road wheels which are mounted on torsion bars. Back in this area here, you've got also the Ford GAF 18-litre V8 engine, developed about 372 kilowatts, as well as a 3-speed Torque-O-Matic transmission. And under that fender there, you've got the rear drive sprocket, which also houses the steering. Now the vehicle was produced from November 1944 to October 45 in Michigan, USA, by Fisher Tank Arsenal and also the Detroit Arsenal, and about 240 had been made by February 1944. About 2,200 were made in total, and post-war about 1,190 went through upgrades to the M26A1 specification with that new main gun that I had mentioned. Here we've got a view of the side of the turret, so a cast turret here. You can see there the commander's hatch that was borrowed from the Sherman. So cast turret here, frontal armour for the turret and the hull about 102mm or 4 inches. Side of the turret here about 3 inches or 76mm. So a substantial amount of armour compared to the Sherman. You can see also a lot of stowage on the side of the vehicle. That stowage was put there because this tank, one of its main requirements was that it needed to be capable of carrying 70 rounds of ammunition for the main gun. So there was no room inside for crew stowage, so they had to put it all on the outside of the vehicle. So moving down here, you can see some of the detail of the suspension. So you can see you've got double road wheels mounted on swing arms going to torsion bars. So there's 6 road wheels per side and a front idler wheel. It's of the same design as the road wheels. Return rollers to guide the tracks back and keep them off the road wheels. And of course a rear sprocket that I'd already mentioned, connected up to the transmission and the engine. Now the vehicle was deployed into Europe late in World War II. About 20 of them were used in the European theatre from January 1945 with the 3rd and 9th Armoured Divisions. They saw action at the Ruhr River. They also saw action in Cologne, and there was a famous engagement at the cathedral in Cologne that was filmed with a Panther tank, a very interesting piece of footage if you can find it, and as well as at the Rhine River at Remagen. They were also used post-war by occupying forces in Germany and Japan, and they saw heavy service during the Korean War. Now that 90mm gun had 2 rounds I wanted to mention. There was the M82 armor-piercing captor round, had a muzzle velocity of over 800 meters per second, and could penetrate 150mm or 6 inches of armor at 1,000 meters. There was also a T30E15 HVAP, high velocity armor piercing round with a tungsten penetrator that could defeat almost 10 inches or 250mm of armor at 1,000 meters. The tank also had 2 30 caliber machine guns, one in the bow and one coaxial, and also had a roof mounted 50 caliber anti-aircraft machine gun. Well, that's all I want to mention about the M26 Pershing. I really appreciate you getting to the end of the video here and hearing me bang on about this armoured vehicle. I look forward to talking to you soon about another tank or artillery piece, and until then, I hope you stay well, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.